Hey everybody, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel, bringing you the monster ecology videos you have requested. Today we are talking about Mephits. Mephits at first glance could be described as elemental imps. This raises some interesting questions, because they are most certainly elemental beings, but they have a form and personalities much more like creatures of the material planes. The imps of the Nine Hells are most likely a form of fiend that is based on the Mephits, and not the other way around, since the primordial entities of the elemental chaos have been around since long before the first celestials turned evil, and the role of the fiendish imps, being messengers, spies, and lackeys of greater powers, are also based on Mephits. And here I shed some light on the lore of the Mephits that should inspire some of you to use them a lot more in your games. Mephits are created. They were actually deliberately formed and sent in a time before the gods arose fully in the astral sea by the great primordial powers of the multiverse. Each of the Mephit forms is a message in and of itself, and the large variety of them forms a lexicon of meanings. Ash Mephits are a rude dismissal, a message that the conversation is over and not to return to the topic. Hence, Ash Mephits are unpleasant and rude. No conversation with them is one that invites repetition. Dust Mephits are a threat. They signify that the sender is aware of the plot being made against them. Dust Mephits are obsessed with death and the ending of mortal things. They gravitate towards lethal objects and coo over them in delight. Air Mephits are timed to arrive just before something nasty happens. They are a precursor, a warning that the giver intends to make a more damaging statement. Air Mephits tend not to engage, but love to witness the pain and suffering of or calamitous misfortune of others, often lurking about invisibly with a good view of the area, but flitting off to hide if confronted. This is a fairly common trait of all Mephits, actually. Stubborn earth Mephits are the embodiment of a refusal. They're a no, refusing to budge from a position, yet they tend to be curious about primordial beings and how they operate. And they almost certainly, almost obtuse single-mindedness, changing their minds about the same speed as a glacier turns a corner. Fire Mephits are displeasure incarnate, ranging from disapproval to downright fury depending on how many Mephits are sent. They are destructive and cruel, unstable and petty. And so it goes. Each of the Mephits has a personality infused into it, however long ago, by primordial powers. In a way, they are thoughts made manifest and encapsulated into bodies that are only as durable and capable as they need to be to travel across the elemental chaos and deliver themselves. An alien form of language to the ways of the primordial beings, but something that makes perfect sense for the mighty entities of form and energy that are the primordials. The Mephits are not constructs, they are living elementals, and there are millions of them. It is thought that the sea of fire in the elemental plane is home to tens of thousands of fire and magma Mephits who swim and cavort in it like an actual ocean. Mephits all share a common body design, a template. They are thin and gangly with spindly and weak-looking limbs ranging between just under 4 to just over 5 feet tall. They have leering and pinched faces with long noses and ears, beady eyes, fanged little mouths. Some sport little horns on their skull, others have either a stubby or a long and whip-like tail, and they all have wings that sprout from their shoulder blades and a body composed entirely from raw elemental matter, either all of a single type or a mixture of two. Despite their rather repugnant attitudes, they are inexorably drawn to more powerful beings. It is a rare thing to find a Mephit existing in a truly isolated life. They gather together in numbers if left to their own devices, but when more powerful beings are around, Mephits will actually gravitate towards living in the fringes, out of the way, observing and commenting from the sidelines, and of course ready to be plucked and dominated by the stronger being. This is how they were designed, and it's in their nature. Mephits have appeared in many publications across the years. They have had some minor changes here and there, cosmetic really. They remain, as they have always been, annoying and quirky little toadies and stooges, endowed with personalities a bit stronger than their physical form. They are the living dross of a forgotten age, the elemental vermin whose only real value is that they are amenable servants to stronger beings, particularly those of an evil persuasion. In early editions, the Mephits had a form of regeneration only when they are in contact with the elements that they are formed from. You could give them a healing boost when they are exposed to their native elements, which would make them a more durable threat for high-level play. They have been enhanced a bit for 5th edition, now being able to cast some spell-like effects innately, normally only one spell, but again, I would beef that up for high-level play and give swarms of Mephits additional higher-level spell effects related to the elemental nature, of course. They all retain the weak breath weapon, which is another hallmark of their species, likened to an elemental skunk spray. It's more of a deterrent than a potent weapon, though a foe with controls over some Mephit minions could certainly make use of it as a detrimental effect in combat. These breath weapons give them a strategic advantage. They're also further modified to now have a death burst feature, a 5-foot radius catastrophic release of their elemental energy, usually in the form of a blast of heat or cold or steam, what have you. Normally the difficulty class of the dexterity throw is no higher than 10 or 11 and the damage is 2d6 or less, or it creates a temporary obscuring cloud. The real joy of Mephits, however, is in the playing of them. As a dungeon master, you have free rein to make these quirky and snivelling little thugs, sociopaths and idiot henchmen. They have all the redeeming qualities of 2-bit hoodlums, and with similar disastrous taste in fashion, and while they obsess over getting their slice of the finer things in life, they're usually content to lord it over their own nests of squalor. Mephit would smoke a cigar of rolled orc socks dipped in old candle tallow and call it a fine stogie. Sporting the soggy and wretched thing from the corner of their mouth at all times, they would pilfer old-fashioned and hideous items of clothing and sport them as if they were the epitome of cool. They will chatter and repeat words and phrases from bigger and stronger beings that they have met or served, and they'll also be prone to repeating the last part of a sentence that their master has said to someone else, particularly if it was a threat or an order. Yeah, see? They are naturally born minions, and they basically know things will never get any better for them, so they just embrace it. You'll find Mephits all across the elemental chaos in the various zones that have their constituent elements as dominant. So mud Mephits favour the borderlands of earth and water, steam Mephits cavort and shriek their demands in the geysers and fuming pools between water and fire. When they find themselves free from service and stranded in the material plane, they will seek out a comfortable environment for themselves, particularly one where they can interact with other living things, as they don't really have any they really have a pathological need to annoy the hell out of other beings, and they could play cruel and petty games on lesser creatures endlessly, as they have no need to pause for eating or sleeping. They do spend periods of time in relatively dormant states of laziness. Although capable of being active all the time, they are shiftless and lazy, mustering just enough effort to whinge and complain to any poor sod unfortunate enough to listen. The list of Mephit air types are air, ash, dust, earth, fire, glass, ice, lightning, magma, mineral, mist, mud, ooze, radiant, salt, smoke, steam, sulfur, shadow, and water Mephits. Seems like a lot, but there's certainly room for more, and I encourage you to homebrew your own. Just strip down the statistics for one and add it to your own flavour to it. Mephits have been around for a very long time, and they usually perish at the hands of more powerful beings or die due to misfortune. But there are some who may have escaped an early demise and have witnessed events from ages long past. A Mephit sage, if you will. Some beings, particularly evil spellcasters and bored demigods, are fond of using Mephits in exotic and cruel experiments, resulting in all manner of weird and deranged Mephit mutants. It's also possible to come across reasonably polite and well-mannered Mephits who were on the surface of good beings for long enough that it's rubbed off on them, as they have a tendency to fall into mimicking the mannerisms of their masters. Feel free to modify and kitbash them to your heart's content. Mephits were made to serve the whims of superior beings, dungeon masters included. I thought I should add a bit of info of what the primordials are, because it occurs to me that Mephits, weak and unimportant little Mephits, could hold the key to an amazing high-level adventure. So the primordials are beings of manifest entropy and elemental energy. As AO created the multiverse from the raw stuff that exists between the realms, in D&D this is called phlogiston, and I imagine we're going to see more of it as we start to see some material for people who love the spelljammer genre. Anyway, AO took the stuff, and by will alone he shaped the D&D universe. In the swirls and eddies of this creation, and the churning forge that is the elemental chaos, that will manifested as primal beings. These things were not created, they just spontaneously arose from the fury of over-god level magic being fully unleashed. These primordials had no checks and balances on them. They created and destroyed with absolute disregard for anything other than their own raw emotions from one moment to the next. They were in no way organized. They had no civilization or shared culture. AO created stars and worlds, and the primordials wanted to cavort and play on these orderly structures, smashing mountains and boiling seas, melting ice caps, making tidal waves, rampaging typhoons and catastrophic seismic events, making it next to impossible for any other life form to develop. At the same time, in the gleaming ponderings of AO manifested as the astral sea, his desire for a division between light and dark gave birth to the first two deities, Shar and Selûne. The primordials had no idea this had happened or the significance of it until the two deities stepped in to protect their overgod's creations, the worlds of the prime materials, and allow life to arise in the oceans. And so it goes. The primordials responded as an unchecked, raw and super powerful entity would. They threw a massive tantrum, and they started to communicate with each other. Perhaps this was inspired by the thought stuff of the deities themselves. They developed their universal language called Primordial, and it's the root of all the elemental languages, as well as infernal ones. And they created the Mephits as living messages that they sent to each other. Perhaps this was done before they actually had a concept of language, and they just sent the essence of themselves and their will in the form of these spawned off Mephits. And here is the interesting part. The Mephits are a direct creation of these primordials. Do they think the primordials had do you think the primordials had the foresight to prevent the Mephits being used against them? After all, the Mephits live thanks to the spark the primordials infused into them. Mighty doors can open with the smallest key. Perhaps when the gods went to war with the primordials at the dawn of time, some of them were defeated and imprisoned using the tenuous links between the primordials and the Mephits. Who can say for sure, but I find the concept very interesting. Imagine stumbling across some super ancient ritual that can use a Mephit to free and perhaps even control a primordial. I shall leave with you that concept. Happy gaming, everyone.